We begin the current Daf, Mesech the Succah Daf Memalef. We begin 3 lines down at the top of the Yomid. We will continue the discussion from the previous Daf regarding the status of Shemitah produce. Our Mishnah was speaking about regarding a lulav and the estrog as it relates to the Shemitah year. That got into discussion regarding how is one mechal the Shemitah produce. Is it specifically through derech mekach, through a sale, or is it even through the classic derech chilul like we do by hektish, we try to transfer? And this Gemara continues to qualify that machlekes. Shir's corresponds because the Cheskel Tanim Daf Chaim. Pishnan is joining us for today's daf. Some things we're going to discuss in today's daf are, as we mentioned, how objects with kedusha shviyas are redeemed. Then we continue on to the halacha, the next Mishnah, when the 4 species are taken for the mitzvah. When then it gets into a discussion regarding when grain from the new crops was permitted at Pesach time, which is when they would bring the carbon ha'omer. How we know we must do things to remember the Beis HaMikdash, and the halacha of using someone else's lulav for the mitzvah, and holding the lulav and other objects during davening. Some of the key terms that constantly discussed in today's daf are Yom Henef. Yom Henef is another way of saying when they would bring the carbon ha'omer, because they would do a type of a waving ceremony, so it's the day of the waving, the second day of Pesach. Advad B'chlal is machlekes regarding when it always says until something. Does that include that day, that time period, or not? And Advad B'chlal holds that it includes that day too. Yom Tov Rishon Shechag Shechalis B'Shabbos. We have a small of a discussion regarding when the first day of Sukkot falls out to be on Shabbos. Then there's some halachic ramifications both for Isser and Heter. And matana manas lahachs shma matana is the halacha that sometimes you need to own something and you can gift it to someone, but on the condition that it has to come back. And then it's considered as that person's, but it's going to come back to the person. Now, we had mentioned on the previous daf how Shemitah produce can have its kedusha transferred. Rabbi Lazar had said, "Ein shvis meschalelis el derech mekach." He says that it could only be through a transfer of a sale, as we had brought psukim for both interpretations. He says it has to be through a sale. Pierre says no, ben derech mekach, ben derech chil, it can be done whether through a sale, which you're buying from him with this produce and then it transfers, or it could even be through the classic chil where you have 2 things and you say, okay, let this be transferred to the sanctuary. That could also do it. So, and that's where our Gemara continues and says, Amar Avashi, this is the 3rd line down from Daf Mem Aleph. He says, the machlekes between Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yochanan, that, again, if it has to be through Mekach or even through the way of Chilul, is bepri Rishon. What does that mean? Regarding the actual produce of the Shemitah year, that's where Rabbi Lazar said that it's not going to work through your classic Chilul way, because he had expounded Smuchin, meaning he brought 2 different psukim, one talking about the halach of Shemitah, and then another pasuk talking about V'chisim kuru memker, that it has to be through derech mecher. That was the original Shemitah produce, could only be done through derech mekach. The pre-sheni, but regarding the secondary produce, meaning the monetary sanctity of Shemitah, which you already deconsecrated one time. Now the second time, Divra Kol there says Rav Ashi, everyone would agree, Ben Derech Mekach, Ben Derech Chil, even Rabbi Lazar would agree that now you could do it through the classic Chil way, through the transfer. It's only the original Shemitah produce, that's what the pasuk's going on when it says the next pasuk that it has to be through a mecher. But the secondary produce, meaning when you already transferred it, and like we said, you could buy meat and then wine and then oil and you keep on. So then once you already passed that first time, everyone agrees it could be through a Chil. And v'hadik tani, so then this that we had learned in the brisa that said lokach, what do you mean? That brisa, which was what supported Rabbi Lazar, which had used the terminology of buying, which is, why is it buying? Obviously, Rabbi Lazar has to be through a derech mekach. There, but all of the peiros, pre-rishon, and even the monetary sanctity, he kept on saying, buying meat with wine, and then with the wine, other thing, and didn't say chil basa b'yayin. Why? According to Rabbi Ashi, said even Rabbi Lazar would agree, and that's what the Tan is like. It should have said lakach only the first time, and then it said, it's machal. So it says the Gemara, you're right. It's only either the Tana Reisha lakach. It's only because it had to open up by saying buying, which was with the Shemitah produce itself. So Tana Nameh Sefer lakach. So that it kept on saying buying, but really it didn't really have to say buying, because once you already passed the original Shemitah produce, then you could even do it through the classic chil. That's what Rav Ashi says. However, Eisvei Ravina Rav Ashi. Ravina asks on Rav Ashi in the following brisa regarding this that he's qualifying in this machlekes Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yochanan. Because the brisa says the following halacha: Mish yesh le'selah shel shvius. If someone has the money of Shemitah, what does that mean? Money of Shemitah, it basically means to say if you had Shemitah produce and then you sell it to someone else, or however you got it, deconsecrated, now you have the monies of Shemitah. And the person wants to buy a shirt. He has a nice suit and it is on sale. Now the problem is he can't. Why? Because the Torah says that la'achla, you have the Shemitah has to be eaten in this year, in the time of the Shemitah year. The problem is this shirt will last into next year, and the Shemitah has to be mizbar, has to be liquidated by the end of the Shemitah year. So what does he do? Ketzad yasa. So the Bible says, I'll tell you what he should do. Let him go to the store that he's a good customer, he's a regular customer. As Rashi says, the only reason is that he'll do what you want. You get the store, he'll take the, maybe those food stamps, or he'll help you out in a certain way. Yeah. But Emily tells him like this, says, Tell me besela Paris. Do me a favor. See this Shemitah produce that I have? Give me, you see the money, I have the Shemitah money. Give me for this money Paris. V'noisno, he gives it to him. Then he goes back to him and he tells the storekeeper, look, Hapirei Paris halalu, which you sold me, which now is chulin, because meaning it got that war chulin, but now became a Shemitah sanctity, because again, the money he gave him was Shemitah money, and it's a sale, so now the produce has that sanctity. He says, these produce, again, this is a place that sells produce, right? He's saying, hey, I'm gifting it back to you, and you could eat it in the Shemitah sanctity. But who, and the storekeeper, he tells him, hey, loch, and I'm giving to you, selazu, this coin that already became chulin, I'm giving it to you, b'matana, as a gift. And now that guy, this customer, he could buy with that coin whatever, masha yirtza, whatever it is that he wants to, and the storekeeper will eat the produce in the Shemitah sanctity. That's what the Brisa says a person should do if he wants to be able to use the Shemitah money to buy a suit. He can't, because any way he's going to do it, he's going to keep on transferring. No problem. You'll buy the produce from him with that money, gift it to him, and then he'll gift you that same coin that you had given, and now it's regular chul money. But says the Gemara, V'hacha over here, this coin, deprecianihu, right? Because it's not the pre-rishon. Pre-rishon is only the original Shemitah produce. This was the secondary of the Shemitah produce. It's the monies of Shemitah. And yet, Uktani, the Brisa tells us that he has to go to a storekeeper. He has to go figure out a way to deconsecrate it to chulin, derech mekach in, only through a sale. But derech chilulai, but he couldn't just do it himself and head home very easily. It's the shvius, just b'machal onto produce which you're going to eat anyway for supper, make that the Shemitah, and then take the money and buy your suit that you wanted to buy. Obviously, we see that even by pre-sheni, by the monies of Shemitah, which is not the original Shemitah produce, you see there's ones who hold that it's not enough. Even there you have to do derech mekach, because again, if it was enough with derech chil, why go to the store? Why do you make such a complicated thing? Go in your own house that you have, and you'll eat breakfast and lunch for the next few days, and be machal on it. And then you'll eat it in the Shemitah sanctity. Obviously, know that even pre-sheni also requires derech mekach, because or else it wouldn't have gone done such a complicated way. So rather the Gemara reverses what we had said. If we're going to teach this teaching of Rav Ashi, it was actually the other way around. Rav Ashi says, Machlekes bepri-sheni. This that there is Rabbi Yechanan that holds that it's going to be permitted through a way of chilul was only by pre-sheni, only by the secondary funds of Shemitah. But the original Shemitah produce, everyone agrees to that, the way as originally said Rabbi Lazar, that it has to be only through a derech mekach and not through that of chilul. And v'hadik tani, and this that we had taught a brisa supported Rabbi Yechanan that said echad shvius ve'echad meiser sheni, that whether meiser or shmita could be deconsecrated, which obviously we saw that shmita itself could be done through derech chilul. Says the Gemara, no, my shvius doesn't mean the shmita; it means the mei shvius. It means the monetary of shmita, because the shvius produce itself cannot be done derech chilul; has to be done derech mekach. The whole machlekes was regarding the pre-sheni. Could the pre-sheni be done derech chilul, or even that has to be done derech mekach, as we just brought a brisa that said like that. And the Gemara proves this, because the ilay tamalacha, if you don't say like we're saying right now, and you're going to tell me meiser mamish, what? Do you think to say that the meiser itself could be deconsecrated on an animal, a wild animal, or bird, as the brisa that we had brought in the previous daf supported that of Rabbi Yechanan? But V'Ksivit says a pasuk in the Varim that talks about by Meiser Sheni when you make mechalet, it says you're going to put the money, v'tarta kesa b'yadecha, and you're going to bound the money in your hand, which tells us that Meiser itself could only be deconsecrated on a coin, and not only that, it has to be a coin that has a figure on the coin. And obviously you cannot do it on Behema Chai B'Oiv. So how could the Bryce have said that you can be Mechal Meiser, a Behema Chai B'Oiv? Ella, obviously, even by the other case of that Bryce, it was told about Meiser Sheni was Demei Meiser. The monies of Meiser could be deconsecrated on animals. Oh, Sachanami, here also when we're speaking about Shemitah, it's not the actual Shemitah produce itself. Everyone agrees the Shemitah produce itself can only be Derech Mecca. Here it's Nami Demei Shvi, it's talking about the Shemitah proceeds, the monies of it. That's where there is an opinion that holds like Rabbi Yechanan, that holds you could do it Derech Chil, but not by pre-Rishon. By pre-Rishon, everyone agrees could only be Derech Mekach in Derech Chil Loi, and that's the revised version of Rav Ashi, that it's only by pre-Sheni is the Machlekes pre-Rishon. Everyone agrees it has to be through a way of Mecher. But then we continue with the next Mishnah. We're going to continue on the theme of these Mishnahs regarding the Dal Minim, regarding the fulfillment of the 4 species. So it says in the Mishnah like this: B'Rishaina originally, Hayalulav Nitel B'Mikdash Shiva. The Daled Minim were taken and shackled in the Beis Hamikdash for 7 days. As the Brisa teaches in Teres Kohanim, it says in B'Samachtim Lefnei Hashem Lekechem Shivas Yamim, the Simcha comes through that of the Daled Minim. That's Lefnei Hashem Lekechem Shivas Yamim. Only in front of Hashem, meaning the Beis Hamikdash. But out of the Beis Hamikdash, it didn't apply for 7 days. It's only for 1 day. Ubi Medina, as the Mishnah says, which means Yerushalayim, which is also considered like beyond the boundaries of the Beis Hamikdash, was only for 1 day. Now, Mishachar Beis Hamikdash, when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Hiskin Rabbi Yechim instituted Sheilulav Nitel b'Medina Shiva Zechel Hamikdash, that the lulav should be taken for all 7 days as a remembrance for the Beis Hamikdash, which they used to take it for 7 days. And that's why after the first day of Yom Tov, or for us 2 days because of Sukkah Daf, the laws of Dal Minim are more lenient because they're not these biblical halacha of shakling lulav. It's only as a zecher lemikdash. And the Mishnah says one other thing the Rabbi Yechim instituted was v'sheyeh yom henef, that the day of the waving of the omer, which it says v'henef as omer in the pasuk, which is the 16th of Nisan, should be kuli aser, should be totally forbidden in what's called chadash, in the new grain. Meaning, when the Beis Hamikdash was around, when the carbon omer, the barley offering, was offered from the new grain on the 16th of Nisan, like it says, ad haviyachem, then it was able to be permitted to eat from the new grain. Now, when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the truth is it actually became more lenient. It's actually permitted from the morning of the 6th of Nisan. The reason why this is, the Gemara says in Menachat of Samachet and Aleph, there's one pasuk that says ad etzem hayom hazeh, which is that up until the essence of this day is when you start eating the new grain, which that's Heir HaMizrach, when the eastern front, when it's the morning. Another pasuk says ad haviyachem, until you bring the omer offering. So how so? So the Gemara explains, when there is an omer, like in the Beis Hamikdash around, it's ad haviyachem, until the omer is actually brought. When there's no omer, it's ad etzem. So it's really permitted in the morning of the 6th of Nisan. But instituted the whole 16th of Nisan, the whole 2nd day of Pesach, is going to be forbidden, as the Gemara is going to explain the reasoning for his halacha. But first the Gemara says an interesting question. How do we know? Rabbi Yechim says we chuck a lulav all 7 days out of the Beis Hamikdash. Now there's no Beis Hamikdash, Zeichel HaMikdash. How do we know we do such things to recall the Beis Hamikdash? So Rabbi Yechim says, because Amar Kraz a pasuk in Yomi that says, Ki a'ale aruchalach, because I'm going to make a cure for you, from your wounds, I'm going to heal you, says Hashem. Because rejected they have called you, by saying, it's tzion, darish ein la, no one seeks tzion. Which says the Gemara, obviously, if it's saying darish ein la, there's no one who seeks tzion, the inference is that it needs to have someone who seeks her, and therefore we do things to have a zeicher, a remembrance for the Mikdash, to say, we are seeking out for tzion, that the Beis Hamikdash should be rebuilt speedily. Now, the second halacha that we said that Rabbi Yechim instituted was v'sheyeh yom henef, that the day of the waving, which is the 2nd day of Pesach, should be totally usher. The 6th of Nisan should be totally usher in today's times from having the new grain. So the Gemara, my time, what's the reason why he made such a takana? Says the Gemara like this: Meheira yibana Beis Hamikdash. Speedily, the Beis Hamikdash is going to be rebuilt, and then things are going to go back to their original status of being prohibited. Because when the Beis Hamikdash is going to be rebuilt, it's going to have the halachic status of Ad Havayachim until you actually bring the Omer offering. Now, if when the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, people are going to go ahead and eat from the morning, you can't wait. It's like Pesach, the pizza store lines are so long, right? So the Chodesh, the new grain, people can't wait for breakfast on the second day of Pesach, the first day of Chol Hamoed, Glach noch Davin, and you have this fresh grain that you had growing on the kibbutz. You can't wait, and the whole family is getting excited. Problem is, you're going to do that when the Beis Hamikdash is going to be rebuilt, because if people are going to say, Ishtakid, last year, Milo echalnu beheir mizrach, didn't we eat that great farina that you made? When it was the first thing in the morning, everyone knows the first day Chol Hamoed, this is when we get the new grain. This year, even though the Beis Hamikdash is built, we're going to also eat it. Now, they don't know the shtakid, the love of Beis Hamikdash last year when there was no Beis Hamikdash. Hey, mizrach, you're right. The break of dawn when the eastern front is lit up, that permits it. Hashlik Beis Hamikdash, but now that there's a Beis Hamikdash, oimer mater. The barley offering permits it. And you're eating too early. It's forbidden to eat from the new grain. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan Institute, he says, you know what? No one could eat the whole 16th day, that we don't get involved in this confusion of eating the new grain before the Omer is brought. The problem is, the Gemara has the following question. This concern that you're telling me that Beis Hamikdash is going to be speedily brought, is going to be speedily built, and you're going to run into this problem, is the Ivni Emas. When exactly is it going to be that the Beis Hamikdash is going to be rebuilt, that you're going to be concerned that Chodesh is going to be usher the whole entire day? The Rabbi Yochanan Zaka in today's times had to make the whole entire day forbidden because of that day when the Beis Hamikdash is going to be rebuilt. Because as the Gemara explains, that let's say it's going to be rebuilt on the 16th of Nisan, which means it wasn't even built only until the second day of Pesach. So then, Hare Heter Heira Mizrach. What do you mean? Then actually, the morning of the 16th of Nisan already permitted it, because since when the Heira Mizrach, the Beis Hamikdash, wasn't built, Chodesh was already mutter from that moment. So that wouldn't, even if they end up building it at 11 o'clock in the morning, we finished building Beis Hamikdash, we're ready to go, it still wouldn't be forbidden because it's already been permitted from the morning. Okay, you're right. El Divni B'Chamesa. So we're talking about that it was built on the 15th of Nisan, or before that, meaning by the time that the 16th of Nisan comes around, it's not going to permit anymore when the eastern front lights up, because the Beis Hamikdash is built, and therefore they eat problematically if they eat in the morning. Rabbi Yochanan Zaka is misaken because of that day. They might end up having such a problem when the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt. But the problem is mechatzois yom al tishtari. Then from even today's times, Rabbi Yochanan should at least permit from noon and onwards, because even if they're going to eat afternoon in next year as they did in the previous year, it's still not going to be problematic, because most definitely by that point they already brought the Karbanan B'Datnan, because we learned this in the Mishnah Masechtas Menachos. Mishnah says, Harachaikim, those who live far from Yerushalayim, who they didn't see and they didn't hear, they didn't know exactly when the Omer is being brought, Mutarim, they were permitted the new grain, from noon and onwards. Why? Lafi, because they know the courts that were involved in making sure the Kam do what they had to do, they would not be lazy, and they for sure sacrificed it before Chatzais. So even if you're concerned that Beis Hamikdash and people are not going to realize the difference between last year and this year, so at least why are you making a whole day us? At least make it from afternoon and onwards, because even if the Beis Hamikdash are built, the Omer for sure is being brought by that time. So the Gemara says, Lo tzricha. No, this is mamish like a chashash. We see how quickly we have to suspect that the Beis Hamikdash is going to be rebuilt. We're talking about, the Ivni Balelia. We're talking about where it's going to be built at nighttime. In other words, we're concerned that maybe the night of the 16th of Nisan, it's going to be rebuilt. Meaning right after the first day of Pesach. And they're not going to have time to harvest the Omer until when it's already close to daytime on the 16th of Nisan. And there's also a lot of effort that goes into the Omer, because they had to dry it in this special flute that had like holes inside of it, and they would gather in all the grain so that the water should run off, and then they would put in a lot of effort to grinding it in specific mills, and they would then sift it 13 sifters, with thick ones and thin ones, as the Gemara says over there. And this, that they couldn't be involved in doing this in the beginning of the night because the Beis Hamikdash wasn't yet built, so they don't have time to sacrifice it tomorrow, even before Chatzais. So therefore, that's a concern that it's going to be rebuilt the night of the 16th, and they're not going to have time, that might be the technicality that it won't be brought before Chatzais. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan says every year you're not allowed to eat the whole day, because it might be brought at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and people are going to eat grain at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, therefore it's going to be forbidden. Or Nami, a similar type of an answer is that it's built on the 15th of Nisan, Samach L'Shkia Sachama, which like Rashi says is really the same thing. It's just saying whether at the nighttime of the 16th or the 15th, like, on the first day of Yom Tov, like a little bit before Shkia. Now the problem Rashi actually brings up is by both of these answers. First of all, we know the Beis HaMikdash is not supposed to be built at nighttime. As the Gemara says in Shavuos Daf Tezvav and Beis, you don't build the Beis HaMikdash at nighttime because it says U'v'yoyim hakum, on the day that it's erected. And so that's the first answer of nighttime. Rashi says the second answer of on the first day of Yom Tov, like a little bit before Shkia, is also a problem because the first day, the 15th, is Yom Tov. The Gemara says over there in Shavuos that the binyan Beis HaMikdash does not doicha Yom Tov, it doesn't override Yom Tov. So how both answers don't make sense, as Rashi. So it says Rashi says, that's a Beis HaMikdash that's built by humans. But the Mikdash HaAsid that we're anticipating and we're waiting for is going to be a totally rebuilt building, which is going to come from Shemayim, like it says Mikdash Hashem Kon Yudecha, and therefore that could be at nighttime, that could be in the first day of Yom Tov, and therefore that could happen at any time. And therefore we're concerned that, boom, the Beis HaMikdash is here, and we have to go quickly get the Aymer, and it's already, it's late at night already, and we have to, so therefore it might be after Chatzais, therefore he said Yom Henav is going to be Kuli Asa. Another approach, a very different approach, says the Gemara, Reb Nachman Yitzchak, he says, why did Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai say the whole day of the 16th is Aser? Because he's Beshitas Rabbi Yehuda Amar. He's the same opinion Rabbi Yehuda, who is actually a Talmud of his Talmud, who subsequently expounded this opinion. He had said the same thing as his Talmud's Talmud. The Amar that Rabbi Yehuda, we just had Rabbi Yehuda on record as saying that, but really it's Rabbi Yochanan, who was generations before, said the same idea, that Menatayruhu Aser. It's actually not a takana d'Rabbanan. It's biblical that the new grain is forbidden on the entire 16th of Nisan. Why? Because the pasuk says, we continue to Beis, in Vayikra, when it talks about that the new grain you shouldn't eat, it says you shouldn't eat it ad etzem hayom hazeh, until the essence of this day. What does that mean? Ad itzum shel yom, until the essence of this day, meaning the whole day is called etzem hayom, because Succah he holds ad v'ad b'chlal. Ad v'ad b'chlal means to say, when it says until this day, it includes this day. So therefore, he doesn't say ad v'loy ad b'chlal. Meaning up until now we were saying, it says ad v'yachem, or it says ad etzem hayom hazeh. So originally we were saying ad v'yachem means either when you bring the Aymer when the Beis HaMikdash is around, or when the Beis HaMikdash is not around, ad etzem hayom hazeh means only up until, but when it's that day itself, it's going to be permitted. That's if you hold ad v'loy ad b'chlal. He has no ad v'ad b'chlal. So therefore, if there's no Aymer, it's until this day, including this day. So the entire 16th of Nisan is going to be forbidden according to Rabbi Yehuda. So says the Gemara, wait a second. Does Rabbi Yochanan really hold like Rabbi Yehuda? But Rabbi Yehuda himself disagrees oleha, because we find Rabbi Yehuda in his generation, which is 2 generations later, he was actually in the wonderment on the takana of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Why did Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai make it sound like it's his own takana? It sounds like as if he's coming to make a rabbinic fence, like we said in the first interpretations. What it means biblically forbidden. As we learned in Tanya, which actually Mishnah Masechtas Menachos that says, Meshachar Beis HaMikdash, when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, his kin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted Sheyehei Yom Henav Kula Aser, that the whole day of the waving should be Aser in the new grain. To which Rabbi Yehuda says, what do I mean? Aser. Takana? It's biblically forbidden. The Chassidus says in the pasuk about etzem hayom hazeh, which means ad itzum shel yom, which means ad va'ad b'chlal, which includes that day too. So how could you say Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says like Rabbi Yehuda when Rabbi Yehuda himself says that it's deraisa and he wonders why Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana? So the Gemara says no. Rabbi Yehuda katar. Rabbi Yehuda, that's the reason why he said it, because he made an error. Who submitted Rabban the Kama? He thought that Rabbi Yochanan had said it as a rabbinic law. But Wallahi, it's not true. In the Raisa Kama, Rabbi Yochanan was actually saying like the same thing as Rabbi Yehuda as a biblical halacha from the pasuk. So the Gemara said, but Hiskin Kama, it says that he instituted. Says the Gemara, my Hiskin, what does it mean that he instituted? It means to say Darash. He expounded the pasuk in a way of ad va'ad b'chlal. The Hiskin, and he instituted, meaning because since people were always accustomed when the Beis HaMikdash was still around to eat the new grain, at least from noon and onwards, so therefore he needed to be masakin, that now we're no more going to be eating after noon. But not because it's rabbinic law, biblical law, because it says ad etzem hayom hazeh, which ad means ve'ad b'chlal, which means the whole 6 of Nisan now is forbidden. It's not going to be permitted anymore. Ad sheyikrivu, which is only when there was still a Omer. Now there's no more Beis Hamikdash. We have to be usher the entire day. So that's 2 very different interpretations in this halacha of our Mishnah. Either he did it midrabanan as a gezerah, or it's actually midaraisa, and hiskin means darash behiskin. Now halacha of the next Mishnah continue regarding in practice how to go ahead and shakal the dal minim. So the Mishnah says Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag, the first day of Sukkot, which the Gemara is going to tell us on Daf Mem Gimel Beit Aleph, that the first day of Yom Tov, that mitzvah shakal and lulav overrides Shabbos, but specifically the first day of Yom Tov that would override Shabbos. So what happens if shachalis b'Shabbos? So let's say the first day of Yom Tov falls in on Shabbos. So kol ha'am ma'lichanes u'levein lebeis hakneses. So all the people would bring their lulavim, their dal minim to the shul from before Shabbos. And lemachras, so then tomorrow on the first day of Yom Tov, mashkim nebam, they get up and they come to shul. Kol echad ve'echad makar shalei b'noitlei. Everyone recognizes his dal minim and he takes it. What does it mean? Why do they have to recognize their lulavim? Because the Chacham said, because a person cannot fulfill his obligation on the first day of Yom Tov with someone else's lulav. So even though it's a shayna lulav you found over there, it's not going to be good. It has to be your lulav. But the other days of Sukkot, a person can fulfill his obligation with someone else's lulav. Now, related to the first day of Yom Tov that falls out to be on Shabbos, says the Mishnah, Rabbi Shloimy says the following halacha. Yom Tov Rishon, the first day of Sukkot, Shel Chag, Shachalis b'Shabbos that falls out on Shabbos, V'shachach v'hitzias alul l'shus ram. And someone forgot, and he carried his dal minim into the street. Patur, he's exempt from haitzah, from carrying on Shabbos, which you're not allowed to carry. Nishitzir b'shus. What does it mean he took it out with permission? It means b'shus of a mitzvah, meaning he was busy with the mitzvah, and he was thinking, and he was so quick, he wanted to fulfill the mitzvah. Because that he made a mistake, he forgot that it's Shabbos. And Rabbi Yisi holds, ta'a b'dvar mitzvah, if you made a mistake when you engaged in mitzvah, and you were shagag, you made an error in halacha for something that you'd be chayv for karas, which is the malach of Eitzav carrying on Shabbos, you're pater from a carbon because of a unique halacha of being engaged of ta'a b'dvar mitzvah. As we'll see in the Gemara, explains the halacha. But first the Gemara says, from where do we know this, that a person cannot fulfill his obligation with someone else's lulav on the first day of Yom Tov? Says the Gemara, the Torah could learn the Bryce. The Pasuk says, "Meyikar b'lekachtem." It says, "Lekachtem lechem b'yom rishon." What does it mean, lekachtem? As Taisa points out, it doesn't say b'lekachta. It says b'lekachtem. To tell you that every single person has to shakal lulav. It's not enough for the Rav. It's not enough for one person to do it. Every single person has to shakal their own, on their own. Now, when it says lekachtem lechem, for you, what does it mean for you? It means mishlachem. It sounds like that from yours. It has to be your lulav. It has to be your dalmin, which is lahitzias shal b'sagazel. That comes to exclude if it's borrowed or if it's stolen, which is not yours. From here, the sages say, a person cannot fulfill his obligation the first day of Sukkot, but the love of with his friend's lulav, unless it was gifted to him. What does it mean? As the Gemara says, because if it's gifted, then it's yours for that moment. As the Gemara brings an interesting story, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, Rabbi Kiva, the 4 great Torah giants, they were on the boat. And the only one who had a lulav was Rabbi Gamliel. And because he had paid 1,000 zuz for this lulav. Not Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Gamliel went, and he took it, and he fulfilled his obligation. He says, Rabbi Shua, I give it to you as a gift. Not Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Shua went, he took it, and he fulfilled his obligation. Then he gave Rabbi Matana, which, as Taisa points out, that he had permission from Gamliel to, because as we'll see, it's a Matana Manas Lahachzer. He gave it to the next one. And he took it, and he also fulfilled his obligation. And then Manas Matana Rabbi Kiva, and then he gave it as a gift to Rabbi Kiva. And not Rabbi Kiva went, shakled it, the Yatzabah fulfilled his obligation. The Hichz he gave it back to Rabbi Gamliel. Says Gemara, why did he have to say that he gave it back? What do we learn out from this giving back, that the Tan of the Mishnah of the Bryce had to mention this? Says the Gemara, Milsa Agav Urchi Kamashman. It's teaching us something parenthetically, meaning, by the way, that Matana Manas Lahachzer, a gift that's given on the condition has to be given back. Shema Matana is considered as a gift, which is a chiddush, because you would think to say, well, if I have to give it, you have to give it back to me, then it's not really yours, it's really mine. So no, Rabbi Gamliel had given to them on the condition that they give it back to him, and even so it's considered as a gift for the time that they fulfilled it. Kihadam Rava, like we find by Rava, that he says, if someone says to someone else, "Hey, loch esrog zeh," here, take this esrog, on the condition that you give it back to me. Not loi, if the guy shuckles it, he takes it. If he fulfills obligation, so depends. If he gives it back, then Yatsev fulfills obligation because it was a matana manas lahachzer, which was a gift, and they give it back to him. But if lo yichzir, but let's say he doesn't give it back to that person, so obviously retroactively it's revealed that it was really stolen because the condition of the gift was only stipulated if he gives it back to him. It's actually lo yatsa. Retroactively, he didn't fulfill his obligation because you were oiker the matana because it was only gift of manas lahachzer. But again, we see this concept of matana manas lahachzer is considered matana. Says the Gemara, and lomali lameima shalok. So why do you have to mention this story? You have these people, they say a story and it takes them like a mile till they get to the main point. And this, by the way, and that was when I had been off that time. And so why the Tana, the Bride is not going to tell you unnecessary facts? Why is he saying that he spent it for 1,000 zuz? To come to tell you, how precious mitzvah them toes into zuz for the lulav. Yeah, that's what tzaddikim pay for mitzvahs. A similar type of halacha says the Gemara, meaning regarding how mitzvahs are chavivis on them. So he says that Abba, my father, tzalui komatzli be, he would daven. When he was davening, he would hold his lulav in his hand because it was so precious to him, the mitzvah of lulav, that he would daven. He would hold it the whole time that he was davening. So you see the same idea of how precious it is. The problem is, the Gemara says, but Meser, the Gemara is from the following brisa, you're not allowed to hold stuff. The brisa says, lo yoiches adam tefillin b'yadeh. A person is not allowed to hold on to his tefillin in his hands when he's davening, or b'sefer Torah b'chik. He can't hold the sefer Torah on his chest. V'yispal daven, because he's very perturbed when he's thinking that he doesn't want it to fall out of his hand. It's going to get disgraced, and he's not focused, not able to be calm when he's davening. So too, v'lo yashin b'mayim. This is parenthetical. Person's not allowed to urinate when he's holding the tefillin or the sefer Torah. He shouldn't sleep with them. Lishin is kva, not a permanent sleep. Lishin is aray, not a small sleep, because again, it might fall out of his hands. As the Gemara says on Daf Chavav Ben Aleph, that this that we say you're not allowed to go do a permanent or a temporary nap was when you're holding it in your hand. Versus you could, if it's on your head, then we said that possibly you would be able to. And Vama Shmuel, moreover, Shmuel said that sakin, a knife, is problematic because you're afraid it might fall, it might just land on his foot, or v'ka'aro, or a full plate of food, or kikar, or a loaf of bread where if it falls you're going to become disgusted, or umais, or money where you're afraid that if you drop the money the wind's going to blow it all over the place. They're the same things. You're not allowed to hold these things when you're davening. So basically the Gemara's question is, how is this possible that he was holding his daled minim when he was davening Shemona Esrei? We said that you're not going to be able to focus because you drop that pitim on the floor, you're done. Right, it's going to crack off and it's going to be puzzles. So you said you're not allowed to hold this sefer Torah, you're not allowed to hold tefillin, all these knives and food or whatever because he's not going to focus. So how is he allowed to hold the daled minim when he was davening? Says the Gemara, no hasam lav mitzvah ninu. There, whatever it is that you're holding, even tefillin or whatever it is, there's no mitzvah to hold those things. So therefore, it's like a package, like a load, like a weight. So therefore, he's perturbed with holding them, and it's weighing him down, and that he is protected, and therefore it's going to distract him from his davening. Hacha over here, when he's taking the lulav and he's holding it, mitzvah ninu. He's actually performing a mitzvah when he's holding the daled minim. So since the mitzvah is so precious to him, so actually the carrying it and the watching it is not considered as a load, and therefore he's not going to be distracted and perturbed with it, and therefore it's actually going to be able to hold that during Shemona Esrei, and that's why you're allowed to hold the siddur, obviously, during davening. I now hold something. No, that's the mitzvah that he's fulfilling when he's doing it with the davening. Therefore, there's no problem about holding daled minim during davening. Similarly, the Gemara says, the Tanya we learned in the Brisa, it says, this was the custom of the people of Yerushalayim. That Adam Yitzim Beisai v'lulav b'yadi. He was coming out of his house with his talis, and he's holding his lulavim in his hand. He was going to shul. He has a lulav in his hand. Kar krishma umispal. He says krishma down. V'lav b'yadi. He has a lulav in his hand. But kar b'Torah, when he would get an aliyah, when he's reading from the Torah, he has to put down the lulav because he has to roll the sefer Torah and open it. So, or B'neisis Kappa, when he's doing the Siyas Kapayim, when he's doing Birchas Ka'anim, obviously he's not coming out poking everyone with that lulav facing out, and he has to do it in the right way. Mnichal gabe karka. In those two times, they would put it down on the ground. But then again, Hoylech Levakachem is going to visit the sick, Unacham Aveilman to comfort the mourners. Love b'yad, again, he had his love in his hand. Nichnas Beis HaMedrash. Now, when it comes to learn Beis HaMedrash, where he gets busy with his sugya, and then it's going to fall out of his hand, so then Mishagul love b'yad b'noi b'yad avdi. Then he sends a lulav in the hand of his son and of his servant, b'yad shlucha and his agent, and we'd send it back home. Says my Kamash Malon. What are we learning from this brisa? The Yacha Kama have his reason mitzvahs to teach you how much diligence a person should put into the mitzvahs, that whenever he has an opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah of Natilas Luv, that the person should have the lulav in his hand. Thank you to any time for hosting us.